right, everybody, welcome. It's Peter Chatty, chairman of Creative University, here for another great session. This time, my guest will be Evan Shapiro, who is the ultimate media insider's outsider, and we'll find out why. But welcome again. I know a number of you are going to be joining, still checking in. But Evan, great to see you. And you're in New York City right now, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So first, Evan, before I get into your bio, I always ask my guests to play a song or choose a song that they want to play while people are holding to join the session. And you chose the Billy Joel classic song Big Shot, and why?
It's funny. I grew up in New Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia, and everybody from Jersey was fascinated and obsessed with the boss, Bruce Springsteen, and I do love Bruce Springsteen, but my favorite was always Billy Joel, and there were a number of different reasons for it. He was a fighter. I mean, he was always, kind of a musical pugilist. I was college, never went to college. I dropped out of college. He just was always fighting something. And that song in particular feels like my conversation with the industry. Listen, Big Shot, you think you know what you're talking about, but at the end of the day, as William Goldman once beautifully wrote, in this industry, in the entertainment industry, literally nobody knows anything.
Yeah, no, that's so true. That's something that we've talked about a lot in Creative University sessions, that there's a lot of people may act or think that they know everything, but people are making it up as they go. There are no rules of the game.
Which is fine. Like you should be,
Yeah.
The cable industry early days was all being made up. The television industry early days was all being made up. The first telephone call was an accident. Watson, I knew immediately. So, if you could plan out these things, you would, and the world would look very different than now. Like, who is it? Mike Tyson likes to say, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
So another pugilist reference. So, listen, I know we have a short time. I want to make sure that I hand the screen over to you, but a couple things, everybody. So I've known Evan now for a number of years, and while sometimes it's easy, not easy, but sometimes it's easier, I should say, to be able to kind of describe what a person's role is within the overall industry. Evan is not that guy. Evan wears so many different hats. I just learned that he dropped out of school. I didn't know that, and I'm curious to get your thoughts about that. But Evan really has done it all. And Evan, we don't know each other all that well, but we've known each other for quite some time. And I really respect all the different kinds of things that you do and the way that you do it, as we talked about previously, because he's one of those guys who's no holds barred. He puts it out there. He's not afraid to tell his opinions. And I respect that. Like he is a pugilist. So really quickly about Evan and top line for you, and then only a few minutes of you kind of describing stuff. But Evan has worked in the media and entertainment and education worlds for 30 plus years. And he's been a content builder, a brand builder. He's taught students and executives. He's mentored. He's led the change for diversity and inclusion in the industry, which is a significant part of what he does. He's an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning producer and creator, produced all kinds of shows, can't describe them all. Portlandia is one of my favorite. And just the last session was with Fred Armisen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, that was a great session, people. You should check that out. He was great. But not even in your bio that you sent me, that you were the president of National Lampoon, Participant Media, Independent Film Channel. Like he didn't even put that on his bio because there wasn't room. Or the fact that he got the major media company NBC Universal into the streaming space in the first place when none of the big guys were doing it. So Evan was a true pioneer there too. And he's also teaches at NYU Stern and Fordham. But just one last thing, Evan also serves as the board chair of the Ghetto Film School and co-founder of One Day Immersion. And that's all about inclusion and getting young people involved and doing, similar kinds of missions to what we have in Creative University. So, congratulations on all the stuff that you've done, Evan. I think it's really cool. Why don't you just tell us quickly, because we only have a few minutes. So maybe like your story about dropping out, because I didn't know. And then how you broke into the business, and then perhaps the most compelling part of your career, if you could even describe that. I'll leave it to you.
So, my parents would only agree to pay for college if I went pre-law. And so I told them I was going pre-law and then did theater. And then dropped out to pursue theater full time. And I moved to New York to write and direct. And I did writing and directing at night and on the weekends and a month every summer at Summer Stock. But then during the day, I worked in marketing for live entertainment, theater. And I did both of those things for quite some time. And then at a very young age, 26, 25, George C. Wolfe, who's a Tony Award winning Emmy nominee, living landmark, director of the original production of Angels in America on Broadway, took over the Public Theater and the New York Shakespeare Festival, Shakespeare in the Park. And he hired me to be for the first head of marketing in the history of the New York Shakespeare Festival, which is saying something because Joe Papp founded it and he was both the head of it and the marketing head of it as well. And it was there, I rebranded Shakespeare in the Park. And that was really the birth of the adult part of my career. And working for a queer Black man in the early 90s, downtown at the Public Theater in Central Park at the New York Shakespeare Festival, and rebranding one of the most storied entertainment brands in the history of America, with very little experience, by the way. It showed me a lot of the, fake it till you make it mentality. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but I had to follow my instinct and I had to listen a lot too. I was working with Paula Scher, who designed all the artwork, and she's a genius and an icon. And really the brand that we created together in 1994, 95 is still the brand today. They've carried it forth all that time. So that was really the first big break. And then shortly after that, all the shows on Broadway, I worked on a show called Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, which won 4 Tony Awards and was a really untraditional Broadway show with Savion Glover. And a lot of the Broadway shows wanted to hire me to go work for them, the producers individually. And rather than work for any one of them, I decided to start a marketing agency for live entertainment called Forefront, and I went to work for all of them. And it was an amazing experience. But right at the beginning of it, I had a 6-month-old baby. I was starting a new business for the first time in my life. I not only have a business degree, I don't have a college degree, and I was running the business. And I was supposed to go direct to play in the middle of friggin' nowhere, and I couldn't do it. Like, there was no way I was going to be able to leave these clients. Disney had just hired me to work on Beauty and the Beast and the upcoming Lion King. Lion King hadn't opened yet. The producers of Chicago had just hired me to work on the launch of Chicago, which hadn't happened yet. And my name was on the door. I was the one they wanted in the room. There was no way I could go disappear to the middle of East, whatever, Pennsylvania. Yeah. And not be there. So I had to call the theater head, who's a good friend of mine, and tell him I wasn't coming. And at that point, and it was really heartbreaking. He was mad at me. I really wanted to be a director. That's what I wanted to do with my life. And it was at that moment I knew I was giving up my artistic career in favor of a business career. And at that moment, I hung up and I was crying. And I said to myself, I'm going to find the creative joy in business. I'm going to find the creative juice I find from directing in my business life, in marketing, and I'm going to pummel everything into, I'm going to punch everything into that experience, and I'm going to get the same joy, and I'm going to get so good at it, someone's going to give me a chance to make art again. And that was 1996, 97. And in 2004, 7 years later, I became the head of IFC. And I got to produce a film called This Film Is Not Yet Rated, which I not only greenlit and produced, but I gave the name to and had a humongous amount of creative input to. Yeah. I got to create Portlandia. I got to run Sundance Channel and produce a series called Brick City. Ghetto Film School came to me through IFC. I wanted to create a film curriculum that was free for high school students across the country, and Ghetto Film School had just launched, and they came and we fell in love with each other, and I was involved with them, ever since. I'm no longer the board chair. I'm the board chair emeritus, but I was board chair twice. And that really reinforced to me my desire to let my career and my love of teaching others become co-joined. And the Run with the Ghetto Film School was a big part of that. And then I started teaching at NYU a few years later. And then I align all of my interests around all of those things. And today I get to produce podcasts and teach and film. It's a hustle. Producing independently is a hustle, but I really much enjoy it, and I love doing things like this. So I hope that answers your question.
No, that's awesome. I mean, what a journey! What a journey! I was going to get into some of these questions at the end, but before we get into the more of the presentation part, because I want you to be professor here, because this ultimately is about all the students who are out there, the young people, and all the challenges that we always have faced, but especially now the challenges can be quite daunting. People can't go to school, at least I have a daughter who goes to USC, and we live in North County, San Diego, so she's not in Los Angeles, so she's not going to school this semester. What are some thoughts or some insights or advice you can give young people about, okay, they have all these ideas in their head. They don't know where to begin. They don't know how to put their feet forward to get into the business in whatever role they believe they want to pursue. Like, what are some general thoughts that you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is knowing what you want, which is a hard thing to do at 20, 19, 21 years old. And so I tend to ask people to do the following exercise, which is take a piece of paper, divide it in half, and every time you feel awesome, write it down on the left-hand side. Every time you feel strong, every time you lose yourself in a book or a conversation or a project, write it down. And on the right side, write down every time you feel weak. For me, anytime I have to explain myself, I feel weak. Anytime I have to do my taxes, I feel weak. And at the end of 90 days, you should have a really nice diagnosis on where to focus your energies and where not to focus your energies. Just because something is easy for you does not mean it's not a talent. In fact, if anything, if something is easy for you, it is a talent, even though it comes naturally. And we teach people the opposite of that. We teach people to focus on their weaknesses and not on their strengths. So find out what your strengths are and try to focus your energies on them. The second thing is, to keep the theme going, make lists. If you want to be in this industry, look at people who are doing the things you think you want to do and make a list of every one of them. And then strive like hell using LinkedIn or friends and family or whatever it is to get a coffee with them. Not a job interview, but some advice and informational. Offering to buy someone a virtual cup of coffee is a really nice way in. And if there is, I have very few knocks. I was a champion of the millennial generation long before everybody was on board, even knew what millennials were. And I used to talk to people about how that generation was going to be charged with saving the earth. Turns out I was fucking right. Gen Z is taking a lot of crap as well. And it's because old people don't understand young people. That's just the nature of the beast. Everybody calls the young kids slackers or hippies or ne'er-do-wells or whatever the hell it is that they're calling them that day.
Yeah.
Gen Z is entering the workforce at the toughest time in any of our lifetime. So worst economy in any of our lifetimes, like a huge global pandemic that has shut everything down. And if there is one knock I have against Gen Z, it's that they tend to let the good be the enemy of the great. We've indelled in them, we've pummeled into them the idea that everything has to be perfect. You have to have the best grades. You have to be the best at this. Instagram teaches you that everybody's living their best life and you're just on the outside looking in. And as a consequence, a lot of my students and a lot of people I talk to who are in that age group, who are in the late teens to mid 20s, they are afraid of failing. And therefore they become paralyzed from reaching out or going for something. They wait until it's the perfect scenario. And I understand that. We've really, as parents, basically taught them to behave that way. And social media is a big influence on that. Don't let the good be the enemy. Don't let the great be the enemy of the good. Take a shot. Make a list of everybody you want to meet in this industry. Make a list of your favorite television shows, find out who produces them, and start calling those production companies. And when they say no, which a lot of them will, just cross them off the list. Crossing something off a list because it was a no is just as much progress as circling it because they said yes. You will learn more from your failures then you will learn from your successes. That is 100% true. It is never wrong. Successes feel better, but we rarely go, okay, what did I learn from that? Failures are worth investigating and post-morteming, and those are the things I would say is like, just keep making lists, keep at it. It's going to be tough, it's going to be a hustle, but the second you let inertia get the better of you, the second you let your fear of failing become the driving force in your life, it will become the driving force in your life.
Amen to all of that, by the way. Great thoughts and recurring themes that we've heard from speakers out there. This, the idea of not being afraid to fail, which sounds so easy and it's so hard, but it's so true. So and just based on your life, the fact that, okay, you certainly didn't have the linear path, right? You dropped out of school, you didn't know exactly what you wanted to do. You had a certain kind of idea in your head, but then you just took steps and it kind of led to something. And look, you were able to define the life that you wanted ultimately. And there certainly wasn't a template for the way you've chosen your life. And now you're involved in so many different things. So I think that's awesome. There's so much there. The power of relationships, like you said, if you're connecting with somebody, that can really help you along your way. And for those of you who are out there and who are involved in Creative University, you're already creating relationships by doing that. So you're already a step above. If you're involved in Evan's, all of the things he's doing, then you already have relationships there, and that's going to help you more than some headhunter out there. So, okay, with that, again, limited time, I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Professor, who teaches at NYU Stern and at Fordham and other places, Ghetto Film School. So we're going to talk about the shape of the media universe. You're going to talk about it. I'm going to interject perhaps and be a student and ask questions. Everybody out there, send me your questions that I can ask Evan also. So there's the Q&A feature, and there's also chat, and I'll look at those throughout the sessions. Probably save those for the end. But why don't we get into your presentation, Evan? And one of the hottest news, at least in the last couple of days, is the fact that Paramount, Viacom, CBS is now getting into the streaming game in a much bigger way. That's the announcement, changing their name from CBS All Access to Paramount Plus. So, obviously you're going to touch upon that too, but I saw your post on LinkedIn earlier today. And by the way, you should all follow Evan on LinkedIn. You should check out his post because he really has great content, and you'll learn a lot from it. But
thank you.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, the post I made today was just grading their announcement. And I think they have a lot going for them. I think they also have some things that they should start to think about, like $5 billion a year sounds like a lot of content budget, but it's not so much. I teach at NYU and Fordham, and every year I would start my class at NYU, at least, because I just started at Fordham this fall, with this map. And it's done by Peter Kafka and the folks at Recode and Box to talk about the shape of the media universe. But as I was starting to put together my class for Fordham, which is a media class as opposed to just TV this fall, this map felt very lacking. When you look at this is primarily TV. I'm not really sure why Verizon is even on this map because it's primarily television. And if you looked at only this map, you'd think, all right, well, Fox and Disney and AT&T and Netflix and Comcast, they're the big players. They're the ones to deal with. They control their own destinies. But then if you look in the corner of the map on the lower right, in gray, almost not there, are $4 trillion companies that are all involved in these businesses that are going to have a huge sway on what happens in the media ecosystem. They have Apple, Amazon, Google, and Facebook. They also don't have Microsoft, which is another $1 trillion company that isn't there. They also, they have Verizon there, which I guess makes sense because AT&T's there, but then there's none of the audio business. There's no gaming business. They have Roku, which is a device company, but they don't have Samsung. So it just felt incredibly, incredibly incomplete. And if you go into the woods with a map and that map doesn't have all the twists and turns to it, you're going to get lost. And if you get lost, you might get eaten by bears. And I'm afraid of bears. So I decided to make a map that was more accurate. Actually, so this was in the LA Times yesterday, right around the Paramount announcement. And this is another map. So this is a March Madness bracket for streaming services, right? That the LA Times did. It's a fun little thing, really good ideas. It pits everybody against each other to see who's going to last, but it leaves out Curiosity Stream's not on here, Acorn's not on here, a couple of others aren't on here. And it really just slims it down to streaming TV. It doesn't talk about anything else. So it makes it seem like streaming TV is alone on an island competing with each other, and that's it. And I wanted to take these two incorrect looks and turn it into something more global. So I created this map of the media universe that incorporates everything. I stole Recode's idea of sizing the bubbles by market capitalization, the value of the company. But I wanted to make sure that everything was included, because the war right now, all due respect to the LA Times, isn't just over TV, right? It's for attention. Everyone likes to talk about hashtag streaming wars, but it's really the media wars. And in the media wars, attention is oil. And you look at what the battle for oil has done to the world over the last couple of years, or last couple of decades, and that's what's going to happen in the war for attention. And so this really opens it up to everybody who's vying for your attention as a consumer on an ongoing basis. And in this context, Disney doesn't look as big as it used to. Netflix doesn't look as scary as they did. AT&T certainly doesn't look dominant. And Roku, while a very good company and growing very fast, size next to Samsung, it puts it in perspective. It also really puts film and television where it should be in context of gaming and social media. I mean, if I could see everybody, I would ask them to raise their hand. Who, while they're watching something on the TV, also has social media open? Well, probably in your audience, 100%, right? Yeah,
no question.
I mean, I do. I watch TV with Twitter open and comment on everything. So Kafka's and Recode's map was focused on television and film, right? But the gaming industry is about 10 times the size as far as income goes as the movie industry.
No question.
Yeah, it's inarguably, I would say, more important to the entertainment economy on a moving forward basis. And then more accurately, Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, and Facebook are all in all of these businesses. And so to look at the players in media and not also look at these trillion-dollar Death Stars on the outside of the ecosystem. I mean, look, I traditionally show the map in full screen, which ends at the yellow frame. But when you look outside the yellow frame, look how big these companies are compared to Disney. Apple is almost 10 times the size of Disney. It's 10 times the size of Netflix. It's 10 times the size of AT&T. It's 10 times the size of Verizon. Samsung is twice as big as Netflix. So you have to look at each one of these companies in context of the other. And then as I was looking at this, and then also on here, it's important to look at things like local media. So EW Scripps, the little pink area here, EW Scripps bought Ion a couple of weeks ago. That local news and local television battle is going to be a heated battle for the minds, eyes, and hearts of consumers. Where does Zoom fit on this map? I put them with the telecommunications group, but I also put them right next to Spotify, Sirius, and iHeart in the audio space.
Absolutely. By the way, on that point, it's so true. Like a Zoom, as you can imagine, they're looking to expand their business model. And so what's a natural play that they're going to be getting into, not just being the provider, not just being the platform to enable these kinds of things, but also to be the aggregate or bring content, original content itself, so it can then charge different kinds of ways.
And who's going to be competing with Zoom? So I don't have Cisco, WebEx on here, but I was on a conference the other day that was powered by Ouye. Ouye is a Zoom-like, communication platform. You know who owns Ouye? Snap. So Snap is obviously thinking about new areas of the business. So Snap and Zoom are actually competitors now. Interesting, right? Especially when you think about how influential Zoom is on education and the changes that are going to come after the pandemic to education because of the pandemic, because everyone's realizing they're paying way too much money for higher education. Whole nother conversation. So as I was looking at this map, And if you read Lord of the Rings, that's what I was going for. That map at the beginning of Lord of the Rings is because I couldn't understand Lord of the Rings. I was always lost, and I was always returning to the first 2 pages of the book so I could look at where the heck everybody was. Where am I now? What forest I'm in? So that's what this is meant to be, is to give everybody perspective. So if you're doing a startup in the business, you should look at this map in context, especially if it's a media startup. If you're in the gaming business, look at who your true competitors are, because they are Microsoft and Apple. And look, Activision looks huge at $75 billion in market cap, but not compared to Microsoft at $1.8 trillion or Apple at $2.1 trillion. So then as I was thinking about this and preparing myself for class this fall, I wanted to think about the winds of change that were blowing through this map that were going to affect all the players themselves, and really allow that to be the context of, solar systems are not stationary, they move. This map is in motion. I just changed every bubble last night. I changed every bubble.
Wow.
Well, in preparation for this thing. So because everybody's market cap changed, and guess what? Roku grew a lot. Disney grew $50 billion since a month ago.
Yeah.
Now they are beginning to look like, if you had asked me 7 months ago, is Disney going to get bought or be a buyer? I would have said they're going to get bought. Now, I'm not so sure.
What's so amazing about, like, just on the Disney example, so much of it is just the fact that it is now placed Disney Plus, which is this recurring revenue model at front and center. So rather than Disney being seen in the world, Disney Plus is more than just a streaming service. Disney Plus is the foundation for ultimately a transformation of Disney's business model from a transactional single sort of, you're a consumer, you buy a ticket, to subscribing and then you get benefits along the way. This is just the beginning. And by transforming its business model, look what Evan just said. Its market capitalization, it's from the street, is fundamentally different.
Well, Disney had the worst year they've had in a decade last year, and they doubled their market capitalization.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, because of theme parks being closed and all that.
Really transformed from an entertainment company into a flywheel in a year, and I'll talk about that. And the themes you just touched on is one of the big winds of change coming through the entire ecosystem. So the 3 big winds of change in the ecosystem are as follows. The first is one I've already mentioned. It's the $1 trillion death stars around the outside of the map. You cannot think about the entertainment or media ecosystem anywhere on earth, but particularly in the Western culture, without thinking of these companies. And there's a number of different reasons for that, but most notably, they want in. And this is a war for attention, and they're going to win at all costs. As Facebook and Alphabet proved, because they're monopolists. Amazon and Apple also prove, because they also act uncompetitively at times. But they also have shit tons of cash to spend acquiring things. Tim Cook at his earnings call just the other day said, we are in the market to buy stuff. So it's really hard to look at Netflix as out of context of Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, and Facebook. It's hard to look at Disney out of context of them. It's impossible to look at companies like Discovery and Scripps and Viacom, and even Charter and ByteDance and Snap outside of these $1 trillion Death Stars. They are a gravitational pull towards themselves. And one of 2 things is going to happen. If you are under the size of Disney, you're either going to get bought by one of these companies, you're going to be put out of business by one of these companies, or you're going to merge with someone else to stave off one of the other 2. That's what's going to happen. Period.
Yeah.
Because there's just no way without that kind of scale. 70% of the advertising budget of the entire world on the internet, which is the largest pool of advertising dollars on earth, go to 2 companies, Facebook and Alphabet. Right? So it's just impossible to think about being an advertising-based business right now without thinking about the gravitational pull of those 2 Death Stars. Chances are,
Evan, let me ask you one question about that. There's this current, activity, significant activity on the antitrust side, looking at these $1 trillion Death Stars. Do you believe that even if all that activity goes forward and there is some breaking up of them, I guess I'll ask you first which ones you believe are most vulnerable, but do you think that fundamentally changes the dynamics that you're talking about?
100%. And it has to do with the second, the wind of change. But yes, 100%. But that's also why they're going to be buyers. Alphabet and Facebook. So Facebook talks about Oculus all the time. Oh, Oculus is so great. It's so wonderful. 98% of the revenue of Facebook comes from advertising. 98%. That's a lot, right? And their entire advertising business is predicated on being a sneaky monopolist or duopolist with Google. Like that's their whole business model, right? 93% of Alphabet's revenue. They'll talk about YouTube Red and they'll talk about, Chromecast and all these other things. 93%, effectively all of their revenue comes from advertising. A lot of it from search, but a lot of it from YouTube. Both of those companies are going to be forced to change by regulators in the United States and in Europe. That's going to happen. They've already started to change. They're starting to pay for news all of a sudden, right? So their entire business model is going to change, and they need to diversify their revenues. They're going to be buyers. So now what are they going to buy? Are they going to buy another advertising platform? No, because they're not going to be allowed to buy another advertising. The regulators won't let them. So they're going to be looking, like you said, for recurring revenue or other kinds of revenue that it has nothing to do with advertising. So the second biggest wind of change that's blowing through the ecosystem is exactly what you just said. The move from an advertising dominated world to a recurring revenue. So it's basically an advertising and single unit sale world, right? So instead of selling a game or an ad, you're moving to a recurring revenue model, which is a subscription model. And that has been as old as the media has existed. So television started as a free service, radio started as a free service, supported entirely by advertisers. Soap operas are called soap operas because soap companies paid for them. And over time, through the cable era, affiliate revenues, subscriptions came into play, and then Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime came into play, and we're moving towards a subscription revenue model. We're not going to move there entirely, but what's the best TV channel in the world right now? It is Netflix. There is no arguing with that, right? It has 210 million subscribers. It is the channel that changed everything. What's the number two television channel in the world right now? Probably Disney Plus. It has 100 million subscribers. It's growing like a weed. They also have Hulu. Those are predominantly subscription-based businesses. Let's look at Spotify for a second. Spotify will tell you, oh, we've got 385 million users and we have 180 million users who are free and advertising based, and our advertising business is awesome. 92% of the revenue comes from subscription. 92% of Spotify's revenue comes from 45% of their users, who are the Prime users who pay a subscription.
And neither Netflix nor Spotify are long-term, have been profitable. Maybe there's been some, in the last year, Netflix was profitable for the first time only because it couldn't spend its dollars on production, but it's not profitable. It burns cash on an ongoing basis, as does Spotify. So like those are little known secrets as their stock price keeps jumping up. But ultimately, you and I both feel there's gonna be a reckoning of some kind.
Yeah, and so the second wind of change is the tension. It's the battle between the ad model and the pay model, the single unit sale model and the recurring revenue model. Paramount Plus's Sherry Redstone said yesterday, we don't believe in linear or streaming. We believe in both. And they have Pluto, and then they have Paramount Plus. Yeah. They also sell their content to Netflix and HBO Max, which is silly, but we can go into that another time. So there needs to be a balance between these two. You cannot have a monolithic company. Netflix is, as challenged as I think Facebook and Alphabet are going to be over the next 24 months because of regulation. Netflix is equally as challenged because they have a single revenue stream, which is subscription, one. And that single revenue stream doesn't work in India. It doesn't work in Africa. It just doesn't work. People don't pay monthly subscription. They don't pay monthly phone bills. They buy prepaid phones. It's just a different economy there. So Netflix needs to diversify its model away from subscription only and into advertising, I would say, or some other business. Apple is moving from a single unit sale model, iPhones, to a services model. Apple One, Apple TV, Apple Music, Apple Fitness, Apple Arcade. They've been able to move their reliance on iPhones as 62% of their revenue every single year. In 3 years, that's gone down to 50%. It's not because they're selling fewer iPhones. It's because their services business has gone from 13% to 20%. That's why they're doing all of those services.
Yeah.
Amazon,
Yeah,
Amazon
again, a fundamental transformation of their business model from, as you said, like this transactional into this ongoing engagement with the consumer where there's a relationship of continuous payment. And all of them learn from Amazon and Amazon Prime. Like Amazon Prime membership is what ultimately transformed that company. It was already massive, but the juggernaut of it today, it's all about Prime. It's all about Prime.
made it profitable, that and AWS. But yes, the recurring revenue business at Amazon, AWS, and Prime drive that business. But more importantly, they have a flywheel. They have the perfect model for right now, which is they're also the third largest advertising platform on the face of the earth after Alphabet and Facebook, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when they get challenged because of their duopoly, the direct beneficiary is going to be Amazon. By the way, they also have 175 million Prime memberships around the world. By the way, they also own Whole Foods. By the way, they also have the biggest cloud service on the face of the earth. And all of it is this virtuous circle where every piece of their business drives revenue at every other piece of their business. Disney is actually getting into that. You said Disney Plus is not just a streaming service. It's absolutely not. The reason why Disney had a lousy year last year is because their theme parks were closed. It's one of their, if not their largest revenue stream. Yeah. But they're going to open up again at some point, and Disney Plus will sell theme park passes, and theme parks will sell Disney Plus, and all of it sells plushie toys, and everything sells merchandise and t-shirts and clubs and everything else. So that's the kind of model that you want. If you're starting a business as a creator, though, you also have to think about this way. I'm going to start a podcast. Most podcasts don't make money. 90% of podcasts don't make money. However, because advertising is you can't get to scale enough. However, lots of people are making really nice lifestyles, having a podcast and then pushing people to their Patreon. I'm in love with this concept of direct artist to fan, Cameo, OnlyFans. So if you're a creator, you have to think of this ecosystem. You have to think about that wind of change. Beyond just selling a show to Netflix at a huge profit, you have to think about ways to fit inside this ecosystem that goes with the current. Right now, the current is, if I love something, I am willing to pay for it. I think CNN will go to a pure paid model. The New York Times is shifted from a advertising-based model to a subscription-based model, and it saved the New York Times. I think you're going to see a lot of that. I think Twitter is going to move from an advertising model to a premium model.
I can imagine, by the way, just speaking of CNN, like one of the things that I've been thinking about, I put it out there was, and I think you and I shared some ideas about this. Wouldn't surprise me if Amazon Prime Video acquired CNN because they're already into the live television game with NFL football, and so it kind of makes sense to bring CNN into the fold. But Evan, did you cover the winds of change?
One more wind of change.
Yeah, I want to make sure you cover that.
So the last wind of change. So I can go on and on about that one because that may be the biggest one. That dichotomy and that tension between single unit sales and advertising and recurring revenue and subscription is going to be the major tension that moves these planets around. The last wind of change is one that is probably close to home for a lot of the audience here, although I cannot see them, so I cannot tell, which is the shift from a boomer Gen X dominated world to a Gen Y, Gen Z dominated world. And yes, that is primarily because as consumers, they consume content differently, they consume media differently, they watch it, they're mobile first, as opposed to being big screen first. But also as consumers, they're going to demand that the stories reflect them. These are the two most diverse generations in the history of the Western world, and they're going to continually look for new types of stories and new types of storytellers telling those stories. Look at the backlash against the Golden Globes, Emily in Paris versus I May Destroy You. I May Destroy You, arguably 1,700 times better than Emily in Paris, and they got backlash because of it. And that's primarily because of Gen Y and Gen Z in particular. But it's not just as consumers either. So yes, as a consumer block, if you aren't focusing on those two generations, you will die, period, end of sentence. Yeah. Secondarily, Gen Y and Gen Z is going to run all of these businesses. They already run Facebook, right? They already run Snap and Twitter, right? Millennials run a shit ton of these companies already. Yeah. But right now, Gen Z is entering the workforce. they're 22, 23 years old. The oldest millennial is 40. People think they're kids, right? The lion's share of the 18 to 49 demographic is Gen Y and Gen Z, almost 100% of it at this point. And so, as consumers, they're going to drive the marketplace, but then also as executives and CEOs and decision makers, decisions will be made differently because those two generations are at the helm. And it will change every single company on this map without question. Microsoft is in really good shape right now, but a lot of their products cater to people older than millennials. Yes, Xbox does really well with Gen Z and Gen Y, but LinkedIn, Office 365, not so much. So that's why they went and tried to buy ByteDance. They also have a primarily subscription-based business right now in Office 365. That's why they tried to buy Pinterest, because they want advertising in their ecosystem.
Right.
So those are the three big winds of change, and all of those winds of change educate this next map, which is my Media Wars scorecard.
And we have to go really rapid fire on this, by the way. By the way, before you do go into this next map, that last map, go back to that for a second. For all of you out there, no matter what your interest is in the media and entertainment world, whether you're a musician or a creator or want to get an executive, whatever it may be, study this map. This map is gold. He teaches at NYU Stern and Fordham. Right now he's saving you tens of thousands of dollars for having to attend class by taking this map. There's so much put into this map that you look at the color codes and you'll see the legend down there. So that will help you understand it more, but spend time with this. Spend time with it. Evan, where can they get it? Just so that
right front and center on my LinkedIn. So if you go to my LinkedIn, in the featured section, you'll see this map and the next map.
Okay, but seriously, guys, that's gold. Okay, so go ahead, and then I got to get into questions too, so I can make sure.
This map is meant to basically create a scorecard for every company on the previous map. I only did my top 10 companies here for space reasons and readability reasons, but you should be able to grade in the media wars of the next decade against those three winds of change. You should be able to grade every single company in the world, including your own new business model, against these 6 criteria. They are: is it a utility? Is it something I pick up every morning before I go to the bathroom? Apple, I guarantee your audience will all raise their hand and say they have an Apple device. Amazon, Disney, on down the line. You'll note that most of these companies are a utility. I would say for parents who have kids under 10, Disney is definitely a utility. Value, are you offering more value than you're asking in return? Do you have super fans? Are you a cult? Gen Y, Gen Z, are you catering to these two generations? Can you manage these two generations as members of your community? And do you have people in the room who are Gen Y and Gen Z when you're making decisions? That's incredibly important. Diverse revenue model, that's what I was really talking about on the last slide, is, are you too reliant on one thing? Do you have a diverse revenue model where no more than 25% of your revenue is driven by one product? Apple can't say that. Netflix definitely can't say that. Comcast definitely can't say that. Facebook, Alphabet, and Spotify definitely can't say that. And do you have a flywheel? Do you have a product, a company where every product you sells a product other than what you're selling? So Disney streaming sells theme parks. Amazon Prime membership sells products and advertising. And you can go down this list and look at it. Spotify, as I said, doesn't have a flywheel. They have a subscription business. And by the way, not only are they not profitable, but they don't own 97% of the content that's on their service, music, right? It's somebody else, it's a license, and they pay a shit ton for it.
Yeah.
Microsoft has a flywheel, I think. I think it's probably not a total thumbs up. It's probably a little bit more of a meh. By the way, the 4 criteria are yes, no, meh, and so close. And so, I would say Microsoft is probably so close, but they will get there. Alphabet does not have a flywheel, does not have a diverse revenue model. So this is how I pick winners and losers. And by the way, if you want to follow me on Twitter or TikTok, my handle is eShap on Twitter and eShap TV on TikTok.
And you can find these on both, on LinkedIn for sure.
Yeah, both of these maps are on LinkedIn.
Okay, so a couple quick questions I have, and then, so yes or no, based on all of this and what we're talking about, do you believe that Facebook and Alphabet, because you have two thumbs down, the red boxes for diverse model and flywheel, if there's breakup for antitrust reasons, how vulnerable are they to, like massive disruption in terms of their, from Wall Street's perspective of them and how their future growth?
I mean, Amazon is waiting for it to happen. They're just waiting for it to happen so that they can step in and pick up the slack. So it's not like they don't have a major competitor who has a killer instinct waiting in the wings. They do. It's a big problem for them. I think though, because they know that and they're not dumb people, they're probably looking to make a major acquisition this year to help change that. So watch Facebook to buy something like Zoom. Watch Google to buy something like Netflix. They have the capital. And Netflix and Google match solves a lot of problems for both companies. Netflix has a thumb down too, for the opposite reason that Google has a thumb down. Together, they get a thumbs up, right? Apple, meh, because the services business Apple Music is doing okay. Apple Arcade is a disaster. Apple TV is not doing well.
Yeah.
It's 3% of their subscribers are on free trial, which they just extended through 2075. So, and it's not because their content's not good. Their content is actually really, really good. There's just none of it.
Yeah.
There. So they need to diversify their revenue stream. And you could see Apple buying Netflix. That solves a lot of problems for Apple. It solves a lot of problems for Netflix. It also gives Apple an heir apparent to Tim Cook. That's a viable heir apparent in either Reed or Ted. So yeah, I think Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, and Alphabet are all going to make major purchases in the next 18 months. I don't know what they are. I would circle Netflix.
Yeah.
I would Viacom. I would circle Discovery. I would circle AMC Networks. I would circle Sony. I would circle MGM.
Yeah. I agree. Like Netflix, I think that there's so much, I don't know if I won't characterize you as a bear. I'll let you characterize yourself. But I've been kind of a long-term, always questioning the fundamental business model that they have. And I've always said for years now that they ultimately will be acquired by somebody for the same reasons you do. So I think we see that similarly. I think Spotify similarly as an independent, its business model just doesn't work. It just doesn't. But it is such a valuable brand and has such a valuable customer base that it makes sense looking at your scorecard like that to be brought into the fold of somebody else.
Well, and also, Microsoft, I'm going to go back to the other map for a second. Microsoft buying Spotify destroys. I mean, that's such a good match. Amazon buying Spotify. Amazon Music is not good, but Spotify and Amazon won't face regulatory issues, and it's a great model together.
Okay, so really rapid fire. We'll have to go faster a lot of these questions. Andreas from Berlin asks, I'm wondering which role non-US companies will play in shaping the international media universe, be it as content providers, aggregators, or gatekeepers.
Yeah, so off to the right here, you'll see Alibaba and Tencent. I would spend a whole class on them. They're both trillion-dollar companies that, Tencent is already one of, if not the biggest game provider in the United States, and Alibaba and Tencent both want big into this ecosystem. ByteDance is owned by a company in China, so I would watch the Chinese market. Now they may be regulated out of getting too involved here, but Spotify is not a U.S. company either. Neither is Samsung. So they are going. Samsung, has a lot of cash on hand. You could see them buying Viacom and turning into a really terrific business. So I would say they will have tremendous influence in the Western and in media in general.
Will Disney be acquired by somebody because
I think they're too big now. I think that unless something dramatic happens, they'll be a $500 billion company by the end of this year. And I just think that Bob Iger is a genius. He outsized them at just the right moment.
Gotcha. Okay, one more question from Andreas. And you talked about this a little bit. With Facebook facing the Australian government, will they, Google, fundamentally change their business model from free content and ads to paid content?
I don't think they'll change it entirely, but I think you're going to start to see paywalls go up in certain places. I think it's more accurate that they'll try to buy a CNN or get into the subscription business through acquisition, because they've not been very successful at it organically. YouTube Red is not a success. YouTube TV is modest success.
Yeah.
Facebook has no look at paid products. So
Okay, no, it makes sense to me too. So Paul asks from, let's see, from Columbia University, what is the next big way for video to be consumed? Is it wearables, or are we stuck with better mobile apps for the foreseeable future?
wearables will never be anything. Um, and I've never believed in them. People don't like wearing media. I mean, Apple Watch is a fine product, but it's not changing the business of Apple. Glasses have never worked. I don't believe in wearables. I think the biggest change is
Apple's betting big on wearables.
I disagree.
Yeah. Okay. No, I love it.
Yeah. I honestly think the biggest change in media is going to be how it influences education. I would watch both Snap and Zoom to change the face of education over the next decade. And I think you're going to wind up seeing Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, and Facebook getting into the education business in a substantial way, because unfortunately the education business needs it, and these are the companies that can afford to invest in it. I don't think I don't think wearables are it. I think AR can have a big influence, especially again in education, but also for live entertainment. BTS had a great virtual concert tour last year. Billie Eilish had a monster virtual concert. Travis Scott had a huge concert on Fortnite.
Yep.
And I would see immersive theatrical and live entertainment inside those types of virtual ecosystems. Like TikTok, Weekend had a terrible Super Bowl. He had a great concert on TikTok. I think I would watch for things like more and more concerts on Fortnite, more and more concerts and live theatricals on TikTok. Watch OnlyFans to get into the live performance business. Watch Cameo to get into the live performance business.
Absolutely. I love the direct, and I talk about this a lot, the direct artist fan possibilities. So it's such a win-win for everybody. You want to get closer to your favorite artist and support their careers. And so you're more willing to pay for them. And it's a great way for artists to be able to expand their craft.
By the way, everyone's so concentrated on reaching 1 million fans and 1 million that and 10 million this and 10 million that. It's better to have 1,000 fans who pay you $5 a month than it is to have 100,000 fans who you get pennies per impression. That's just math.
Yeah.
So
Science.
There's a great song from Title of Show. It's a Broadway show, and it's called My Favorite Thing. And the lyric goes, "I'd rather be 9 people's favorite thing than 100 people's 9th favorite thing." And if you're an artist right now, think about that. So a subscription revenue model for an artist is substantially better than a single unit sales or third-party sales model.
Yeah, and Patreon, helped really start that, and now it has a market cap of over $1 billion. So think about that. Okay, so Jane, really quick now. So these are like bite-sized answers. Jane asks, I applied to Fordham Business School and had my interview last week. Fingers crossed, we do too. Do you have any advice for students who are preparing for business school who want to enter media, and what qualities do you most enjoy that students bring to your classroom?
Preparedness, being ready to have an interesting conversation. Always be prepared to have an interesting conversation. Secondly, network, never stop networking. Always do it. Join associations, HRTS, JHRTS in New York and LA. And then publish on LinkedIn. You don't have to be an asshole like I am, but if you publish once a day, all you do is publish your favorite article that you read on LinkedIn with interesting. The algorithm tricks everybody into coming to your feed. It's a great way to artificially network.
Yeah, no, and there are so many different steps you can take, even when we're all stuck at home and in our bedrooms and everything. So Gloria asks, and she's from University of San Francisco, what was the defining moment in your career? Well, you talked about that a little bit, and how has it affected the way you create now?
That moment when I hung up the phone and I was in tears because I was not going to be a director anymore. It taught me how to find creativity in everything that I do. And it also taught me what I'm best in the world at. What I am best in the world at is leading creative change. That's what I do. But I wouldn't have found that out had I pursued directing long term. I don't think I would have. And so that really changed the trajectory of my career. And it told me that you don't have to necessarily be directing a film or a piece of theater in order to be an artist. You can be an artist with a spreadsheet. You can be an artist with a PowerPoint presentation. This took me months to make this map.
Oh yeah.
A shit ton of attention. So you can bring artistry to anything, a conversation. And so that's what I learned is find out who you are and then be that, because there's one thing no one can be better at than you, and that's being you.
That's great advice. Okay, Will asks, I'm an Aaron Jackson super fan and adored the National Lampoon Radio Hour. Can you talk about how comedy in the 2020s will intersect with the media landscape?
I think comedy, I mean, for Gen Z and Gen Y, comedy kind of is the natural language. It is the native language. It is the native language of the internet. Even in politics and activism, being funny, writing a good meme is really powerful thing. I think there's this misperception that wokeness has limited artists, comics' ability to be provocative, and that's just not true. You can be offensive and funny if you know what you're doing, if you write a good joke. If you're lazy, if you're a hack, then you're going to get canceled. So write a good joke and you won't get canceled. Bo Burnham wrote a really great rape joke, which is, the worst thing about being a rape whistle factory is going out of business when you're successful. So you can really craft a very good offensive piece of comedy if you know what the heck that you're doing. If you're a hack and you're lazy and you don't do your homework and you don't put in the hard work, well, then wokeness will catch up to you. It's not being held accountable for being a grown-ass adult is not cancel culture.
Yeah, completely agree with that. One last question that I'll ask, and then for all of you, I see a number of comments that you'd like to connect with each other because you don't know each other, yet you all know that you're passionate about this industry in some kind of way. So that's the purpose of Creative University too, is that you guys can connect directly. You don't need me, the middle person, to be able to do that. And so we have Creative University as a LinkedIn page. You can connect via LinkedIn that way too. But last question for you, Evan, with all the things you've done, what has been the most satisfying experience that you've had? You define what satisfying means to you.
Raising two grown women as my children.
I love that.
Not a close second place either.
Yeah, so true. Love it. I'm going to let you go. I know that you have to go. Being the thought leader and professor you are, you have to jump onto another one of these kinds of sessions. So everybody follow Evan. Really smart, intelligent, candid, controversial sometimes. But he's willing to make calls, and I agree with a lot of them. So thanks so much for supporting. Guys, I'm going to stick around. So Evan, thanks you so much. I'm happy to support all your stuff because you do great things.